I want to welcome everybody to the show, Mr. Tim Tramble.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, like I tell everybody, the hardest part of this show is me making it through you guys' resume. Everything else is pretty much downhill after that. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about you growing up, and we're going to get right to it. I know you're a busy man and don't want to take up a lot of your time. So tell us, Tim, you grew up in the Huff neighborhood. I grew up in Glenville, so we was right around the corner. So tell me, where you grow up?
Actually in your hood sometimes.
Yeah.
Because my sister is old enough to be my mom.
Okay.
I am the last born of 13.
Woo.
And my closest sister is 5 years older than me.
Okay.
So a lot of my sisters and brothers were old enough to be my fathers and my mothers. And one of my sisters lived in Glenville, and my closest relatives, the people that I hung out with, was her sons, and they lived in Glenville. So
where did they live in Glenville?
they lived on 131st off of Woodside.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was like my second home.
In the Huff neighborhood, where did you grow up over there?
East 81st and Superior. I went to Sawinski.
Okay.
If you want to go deep.
Yeah, we're going deep. Yeah, we want to figure out who you are. Yeah.
I went to Sawinski, which is on Sawinski.
I remember what Sawinski was. Yeah.
East 79th.
Yeah, it was 79th, right.
And then when they did the whole busing thing, I went to Daniel E. Morgan.
Okay.
From Daniel E. Morgan, my mom, she actually put me in Lutheran school. I went to a school called Lutheran Urban School on East 55th.
Okay.
Now I think it's some charter school, but it's on East 55th in Superior. And then I went to East High School.
So what was it like growing up over there in the Huff neighborhood when you was coming up? I was listening to you talk on another interview, and you were talking about growing up there, and you mentioned the fact that you kind of stayed out the way. And
I grew up during the crack epidemic. Right?
Correct.
I'm 51 years old. And at that time, in the 1980s, 86, 87, 88, when I was in high school, I mean, it was like the height of
that was the height. Yeah, that's when we were there.
Cleveland.
Yeah.
And so my friends, most of them were selling.
Exactly.
And they were selling very close to me. And I just chose not to do that. That wasn't anything that I wanted to do. But outside of that, everything else, other than using or selling drugs, I never used or sold drugs. But outside of that, I was very acculturated into my community. I grew up during a time, if you were of your community, you had community pride.
Correct.
And I had the pride of being from East 81st and Superior. And I really didn't want to me, like my mom was telling me, we're going to move to a foreign land to go to Lutheran school. So for me, growing up in the neighborhood, growing up in the inner city, I told the story about how I really found my passion in community development. And it was really from seeing my neighborhood for the first time from the eyes of a visitor. But trust me, during my childhood, I feel like I had the most amazing childhood. Although I saw a lot of decline during the time I was a child on my street and in my neighborhood, in the Huff neighborhood. Went through a lot of decline during those years. I enjoyed every minute of my childhood. For me, growing up in the hood, it was wonderful.
I went to Empire. It was funny because you guys lived across the park, so we used to say, "Oh, there goes the people across the park," and it used to be that little rivalry that you come up the hill and come up to our side of the park, and every day was chasing them back across. Was doing that, and we also did a lot of 80th. I went to school with a lot of guys who lived on 80th, and we played football against you guys a lot over there, where your side would come and we would meet right there in, down in the middle of the boulevard, and there was a place called the Farmer's Yard over on the east side that we all would come and play football, and we did that a lot. And as we got older, you guys went to, the class went to East High, and we got bused. So it was kind of crazy back then. Our middle school, we didn't get bused. They sent us to our neighborhood school, but then they sent us away for high school. They sent you guys over to our neighborhood for middle school, but then they let you guys go to East High, and I was sort of like you. I wanted to go to Glenville because we had You know, one of the things Glenville, and I don't know if East High used to do it, but back in those days, you know, the football team and the band would actually march through the neighborhood right before they get ready to do it, just a little bit to let everybody know that that was going on and that kind of thing. And as a kid, I can remember seeing that, and that gave you a sense of pride of saying, hey, I want to go to Glenville. I want to play, be a part of that team. I want to do those kind of things. And as we got older, you know, and like you say, things got changed. Things just seemed to just kind of got worse, you know.
Right.
So let's move on. Then I got something. You went on ahead and you graduated East High and you went to Central State.
Central State University, yes, the only public HBCU in the state of Ohio. I'm very proud of that as well.
Now I got something that you didn't know that I know. Central State University. You went there. My wife went there, and you guys were in the same apartment building.
Really? Was that the Chihuahuas?
At the Chihuahuas.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. She stayed at the Chihuahuas. She said y'all had a little incident over there at the Chihuahuas. Yeah, we're gonna let it go. We'll let it go. It was no big deal. But she mentioned, she said, "Oh yeah, I remember him very well."
Yeah.
Lisa McGuthrie, and she was there. And my wife went there.
Who is your wife?
Her name was Yvonne Wright at that time.
Yeah, I don't remember your wife.
Her and Lisa and Audrey, all of them kind of all hung out together, and they all went to school together.
Yes, and they were older than me.
Yeah, that's what she said. She thought you were underclass.
Audrey was, I mean, she's still a wonderful friend. I just love Audrey. And she's a champion of Central State. And all
Right,
the
exactly.
HBCUs.
Exactly.
So, yeah, just a wonderful person who works for Cleveland Cavaliers. And
Yes.
very proud of her and what she do and how she represents Central State.
How did your time at Central State was for you down there?
It was wonderful. So, my situation was a bit different because my wife and I, we were teen parents.
Okay.
And so, you know, my first year, I stayed in the Chihuahuas. It was just my first year that I stayed in the Chihuahuas.
Okay.
But after that, you know, my wife graduated from high school, and we had a child. And so we stayed off campus together, raising our child. We didn't leave TJ home. TJ stayed. TJ came with us.
And so while you were at Central State, you was raising your kid?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
And your wife was in school, or was she home?
She was at school. She's a graduate of Central State as well.
So both of you guys were going to Central State and raising your kid at the same time. So y'all lived off campus, I would imagine, and had
We lived off campus, yes, and we're still together. We are high school sweethearts, and we're still together.
You know, that's now. See, I told you, I only bring people on I thought were interesting people. That's very interesting. Out of everything you did, I think that's really interesting. So that had to be. That's very rare, and it had to be rough and tough back then, right?
It was definitely tough. And if you know anything about Xenia,
Right?
the area
Exactly.
around Central State,
Exactly.
The big thing is that you got this HBCU in this area surrounded by cornfields and
Correct.
surrounded by racist people, right? And so living in Xenia as a family, as a young family, yeah, it was an interesting experience. Definitely toughened you up and got you prepared for what you have to deal with in the corporate world.
Yeah, big kudos for that, man. You know, because I went down there. My daughter goes there. My oldest daughter, she goes there now. She's graduating this year, and I went down there midsummer last year, I think it was, for something she was doing, or right in the middle of school year. But I remember I had to go through town to drop the wife off to go to town to get some stuff to bring back to the dorm. But I remember when I got in the middle of Xenia, man, they were having a great big old Trump rally. Huge Trump rally. And up here, if somebody has like a Trump rally or something, you're just like, you know, they having a Trump. No, I had to ride through like a Trump rally, and I was like, oh my God, it was eye-opening.
Yeah, you was in deep Trump territory too.
Oh man.
Isn't that amazing that just 3 miles away there's HBCU?
Two.
Yeah, that's right. I don't want to forget.
Yeah, Wilberforce. Yeah, two.
But, you know, Central State is really like. That's why you got it.
So for Central State, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I understand. It's like going to Morehouse for Spelman.
Yeah. I don't know anything about that. Wilberforce, you know, the capital of Wilberforce is Central State.
I know that's right. So it was that was hard. Y'all both graduated, made it through that. I take it, and y'all came out the same time, or you had to stay a little longer, or
I came out earlier, and she came out not too. I think just one semester after me.
So you stayed in Xenia and worked a little bit?
I stayed in Xenia, worked a little bit. I worked for a company called Hill Springs Products for about 6 months, but then I landed a job. So I did have to come home because I landed a job. My first, you mentioned CT Consultants. I landed that job and began working.
And so what was you doing at CT Consultants?
CT Consultants, I was what you call a environmental specialist, and basically like downloaded rain gauges, installed range gauges, installed flow meters. I did assessments of water treatment systems.
Okay, all right. And then how long was you there?
I was there for a year and a half before I went to the health department.
Okay. And what was you went to the health department? Which administration was you under? Was that Mike or Frank?
I was under the Mike White administration, and he preferred to be called Michael White. So excuse me for that mistake. I was under the Michael White administration, and yeah, we were dealing with. I was in the lead department, so I was dealing with childhood lead poisoning. And it's interesting that we're still dealing with that today, but I understood 30 years ago the significance of childhood lead poisoning and how impactful it is to the development of growth of our young children.
I want to stay on this lead thing just for a second because it's something I just don't quite get with the lead thing. And it's just me, and it could be my naivety or whatever you want to say. I just don't know. But it seemed like to me that I knew we grew up, and I can say we because you're close to my age and we were in the same thing. We grew up heavy in lead paint and all kinds of lead products that were going on in the community. I remember as a kid, you would go down the side of houses when aluminum siding first came out. Because we were around when aluminum siding first came out, and when siding first came out, you would run down the house and you would rub your hand on the house, and your hands would be white, or whatever color they painted the house, and that was lead paint actually on that. And we would still go out and play all day and probably eat and do whatever without washing our hands or any of that stuff. And generations went on dealing with that as it went on. When did it become that we thought that was an issue? And now, because it would seem to me now, I'm 54 years old, that by now and I remember I worked at Glenville Development Corporation for a short period of time, and when I was there, they sent me to school, and I actually got a certificate to be a risk assessor to do lead painting, and that was way back in the day. So it seems to me that by now we would have had some solutions or something. What's the deal with the lead? Why did we get to that kind of point, you think?
So here's something that I don't know if your audience is aware of, but the reality is that some believe that the Roman Empire, the demise of the Roman Empire was due to lead. Lead is sweet, and it tastes sweet. And so when children consume it, they consume it for the sweet taste, and it impacts cognitive development. And so the reality is that you and I, if you trace lead levels back, many of us actually had lead poisoning. Right? And the significance of that is if you're sharp, if you're smart, if you're intelligent, and you had an impact to your cognitive development, imagine how sharp and intelligent you would be without it. So it is significant, right? And we, as we are resilient, right, we find a way, physiologically and social, emotionally, we find a way to persevere. But the reality is that lead is a very serious element that can impact our impact our cognitive abilities. So we do need to take it serious. And again, you may have had lead. The amount of lead in a child's body today that's considered lead poisoning is significantly less than the amount of lead in a child's body 30 years ago that was considered lead poisoning, right? I believe 30 years ago you had to have, and I'm going really back on my memory.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was like 35 deciliters
Mm-hmm.
of lead, 35 milligrams per deciliter,
Mm-hmm.
right? I might have those numbers
Mm-hmm.
mixed up,
Mm-hmm.
but today I know that it's like 5
Really?
milligrams per deciliter. Yeah.
So there has been some real big improvements and moving towards trying to battle this.
There has been improvements in recognizing the significance
Mm-hmm.
of the levels,
Mm-hmm.
right? So even if you have like 10
Mm-hmm.
micrograms per deciliter, that is significant.
Mm-hmm.
When we were young,
Mm-hmm.
that was under the threshold of lead poisoning, so it
Gotcha.
was okay.
Okay.
But they've done enough studies to know that even at those levels, there is cognitive impact.
So let's move on to getting you over to Burt Bell Carr because that's where I know you kind of cut your teeth at. You did lots of programs there, lots of development. You was working in one of the rougher neighborhoods in the city of Cleveland, working in Garden Valley and in that whole area, not just there, but parts of the Buckeye area and parts of 55th with all of the public housing and that. What was it like going into Burt Bell Carr, the transition from the city? How did you get there, and what was that all like?
So I tell this story. In fact, I just told this story this morning because I think it is important for people to understand how the people land in places and why do they contribute 20 years of professional development in place.
Mm-hmm.
So I told you about how my neighborhood was my paradise when I
Mm-hmm.
was young. And I told you, that I went to Central State
Mm-hmm.
University. I didn't really recognize the decline of my neighborhood, the disinvestment of my neighborhood, the state of my neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
until I went away to Central State and came back and saw my neighborhood there for the very first time
Mm-hmm.
in the eyes of a visitor. I was 18 years old, and that had a profound impact on me because I loved it so much. I enjoyed it so much.
Mm-hmm.
My mom used to talk about moving, and I remember being 10, 11, 12 years old and literally being sad
Mm-hmm.
about the thought of moving
Mm-hmm.
from my neighborhood. And I had an experience, this is now probably maybe 15 years ago, where we were planning the redevelopment of Garden Valley.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the plans at Garden Valley. We had the plans for Garden Valley within our offices. This was 2008, I know
Mm-hmm.
specifically because I remember when we moved in. And so we wanted to have youth actually do the upkeep, provide them jobs to do the upkeep for Bridgeport Place, the building that we built,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the first building built
Mm-hmm.
along Kinsman in 40 years when we built that. And there were 3 youth who came, 3 young men who came, and they were around the ages of maybe 16 to 18.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked them, as they completed their applications, I asked them, so have you guys seen, have you heard, did you contribute to the plan for Garden Valley?
Mm-hmm.
And they said, yeah, we heard about it. I said, do you want to see the results? Did you see the results? They said, no, we didn't really see the results. And they were like all melancholy about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked, what is the issue? What's the problem? Why you guys are not excited? They said, well, we know that people outside of our neighborhood, we know what people outside of our neighborhood think of our neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
But to us, this is our home. Like, we love this place.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me back to when I was a kid. Like, I really get that. I understand that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when you are in it and it's all you know, you make the best of your experience in it. You don't realize you don't realize the blight. You don't
Right.
realize the disinvestment.
Mm-hmm.
You don't realize what the environment does to you and for you. You don't even realize
You condition yourself
that
for it.
environmentally,
Mm-hmm.
there are things that impact our health.
Mm-hmm.
Environmentally, there are things that just impact our psyche,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't even realize it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, um, that is something that drove me to. That is the thing that drove me to community development. It's like, wow, realizing that many people are like me. They've never been anywhere for an extended period of time to really realize the state of our neighborhoods and the state of our communities, and how we, from the inside out, really need to redevelop our communities and claim our communities and stop running away from our communities. And I don't know what it was about me. Most people, when they see what the state of our communities are, they run from it, but that fueled my passion to do something about it and to stay in it.
So did you go over as a director, or was you brought over and you became executive director at Burt Bell?
So I was hired as the executive director of Burton Bell Car.
Okay. And how old was you when you did that?
I was 29 years old.
Okay.
I was hired as executive director at Burton Bell Car, and you alluded to it. Yeah, it was a risk, a high risk, coming from the city of Cleveland, where there's job security, you have quote unquote civil service status, and going to a place where you're an at-will employee and everything hinges on your shoulders. And if you're a failure, you certainly are going to lose your job, right? So, but for me, that risk wasn't much of a risk.
So was Mayor White still the mayor, or was Jackson mayor by that time?
Mayor White was still the mayor. Mayor White actually, he was a part of a ribbon cutting for one of the very first projects that we did. And I can't really claim any part of the conception of that, because and we weren't really a role player. We were kind of in it in name only. I like to think that my contribution to the organization was really playing the role that a CDC was meant to play, not as a pass-through, but as a organization that was looking out for the best interests of the community and ensuring that we do development in a way that truly maximize the value and benefit to community.
So moving into that, then your first time getting there, you guys wasn't at the building you guys house right now. You were somewhere else. And so what was that project? I remember getting that project made a lot of headway and made some news in it. You building that strip center there. I think the library was a part of that whole piece that was there, and getting them to stay as a tenant and being a part of that. I do remember hearing, talking to you and other people back in the days about the whole development of that, incorporating the community as part of that to play a role and letting you guys know what it is that you want from the community, or what the community wanted from you guys in order to put there. And that's how the library came, the kitchen that was there, and the restaurant there, and getting people to work in the restaurant that were from the community. I was all in that stuff. I was all in there really big time in that. And you was working, Sabre Scott actually was working with there for you guys. And she had, I was going through this weight transformation and trying to lose some weight, and having some health issues. And one of the things they asked me to do was, you ought to take cooking classes so that you can learn to eat healthier. And so I was going through online looking for cooking classes in Cleveland. And lo and behold, I ran across your cooking class, and then found out Sabre was working up there, which made it even better. And had a great time there, man. Cooked with Eric Wells a few times, Val Scott. And my favorite was, her name was Chef Robin Blair. Chef Robin. I remember she taught us a whole lot up there. And what was funniest, though, the funniest thing, and I know you may remember because she had to be involved in everything. You remember Arthur Fane's sister?
Oh, yes.
It was so funny about her. I just can't remember. Priscilla. She took cooking classes, but was allergic to everything. I mean, everything we'll make, and we'll get ready to cook it. She was like, all right, we'll make it, but I can't eat it because I'm allergic to it. And we'd be like, you're allergic to everything we done cooked. I think that whole time we took that whole class, it was one meal or one dish that she actually really sat down and ate with us. But learned a lot there, man. The kitchen that you guys built there was awesome. So tell me a little bit about the development of that and working with the folks in the community to pull all of that off. Was that your first big project you did?
Oh, no. That was not the first big project. Again, I was at Bourbon Car for 20 years. So
okay.
That was in the second decade.
Wow.
Early in the second decade, but that was in the second decade. The first decade, we built more homes between 2000 and 2010. We built more homes, built and sold more homes in the central community than any other neighborhood during that time.
And these were market rate?
Those were market rate. So
really?
They're still there, yeah. There are over 300 homes built in the central neighborhood that was built between that time frame. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so you go on 36, 37, 38, off of Cedar, off of Central, off of Community College, and there's a plethora of homes that were built in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I remember that.
Bourbon Car was the engine that drove that.
Wow, and 300, you said?
300.
Wow.
All the way up to 63rd off of Quincy. There are homes built off the side streets of Quincy up there. Off of Scoville, there are homes built. Yeah, we built a lot of homes between that time.
Oh, that's huge. That's really huge. I didn't even know it was that many homes. I remember the development going up because there were new homes being built over there, and you saw them come out. I didn't have no idea it was 300.
Yeah, and the significance of that is that if we all remember Central the way that it was in the 90s, you know that it was comprised primarily of public housing. And I remember early on in my first year, someone telling me, like, your task is next to impossible because you're expected to build homes for sale in an area that just has public housing and cemeteries. Like, how are you going to do that? How are people going to buy into that? And they did. And to this day, I know the value and I know, like, the formula to get people to buy into a community.
What was the formula to get people to buy into that neighborhood?
The formula is simple. It's mass construction. So when people see that there are going to be many structures, there are going to be many people that invest in the community, they're not going to be on the island by themselves. Many people will make those investments. And we were building, and we had the finances to do it. We were given a $12 million loan from HUD, a revolving loan from HUD, and we were able to be creative with how we use it. We used it as a revolving construction loan.
Correct.
It's a very, very low interest rate. So today, right, if you think of, if anyone knows about development, one of the key costs associated with development is the interest rates of your loan. I mean, a loan at the conventional rate of 4.5 today, which is going up, it's probably going to be like 5%, versus a loan of 1.8 to, I mean, that's a substantial difference in the amount of interest that you pay on the construction of the property, and that allows you to sell a property at probably 10 to 15% less. You couple that with the subsidies that the city was providing at that time, and we were providing up to $45,000. And at that time, construction, you could build a home for $120,000.
Correct.
So we can save people almost a total of like $55,000.
Yeah, that's huge.
And the construction, and so they were affordable. That truly was an affordable for sale housing development. It's tough to make those numbers work today, but we made it work then. And you'd say, well, why aren't they still doing it? Because the numbers don't work like they did then. And we don't have a $12 million revolving loan at 1.8%. It fluctuated, but I think the highest it was like 2.2. But I think in some duration of time it was like 1.2. So it was a very low interest rate that we were able to build the homes, and basically like building it without interest or nearly no interest.
Yeah, that's huge, man. I had no idea it was that many houses put off in that area. You know, I saw, like I said, again, growing up, just riding through there and coming through there, I saw it was lots of beautiful homes built over there. I think Councilwoman Cleveland ended up over in that area as well.
Yes, she did. She bought one of the Central Commons homes.
Yes, so I thought, coming from our perspective, I thought y'all did very well with that. What was the biggest challenges coming in there?
Is the neighborhood politics, is navigating the funding streams, and how do you tie in to the funding streams that exist. Tax abatement policy is 15 years, 100% on the improvement of the property, right? If you're building new construction. But you can get that if you go to Tremont, you can get that if you go to Huff, you can get that if you go to Ohio City, you can get that if you go to Buckeye or Dunville. So why would someone build a home if they can get the very same subsidy, the very same discount in those neighborhoods that are more stable? It shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all.
Exactly.
Right?
Right.
There are a lot of structural racism and a lot of structural disadvantages in the way of funding streams.
And what's very dangerous about that is that if you have community development directors or people, don't have to be a community director, it could be just community period, where you have developers or people who come in a community who don't keep that in mind, it devastates these communities. I know from there was a whole lot of other branches that popped off after that, so let's talk about that one a little bit.
Okay, all right, so yeah, you're very interested in Bridgeport Place, and Bridgeport Place was built in 2007. It was completed in December, actually, of that year. And you outlined, and I'm very impressed that you were aware of our development protocol, our development approach, our development strategy. And so it being the first building built on Kinsman in 40 years, we engaged the community. We went to the church that is a stone's throw away, Harvest Missionary Baptist Church. And I remember it like it was yesterday. And we had a planning session with the community around, we're going to build something right here on this corner of 72nd and Kinsman. And we want to know from you what you think it should be. Right. One thing that we know that is going to be there is our offices, because this is, if we had a central location of our service area, that's where it would be. And we want to be in the heart of our service area, and we want to be on the ground. We want to have a ground floor presence within the community. So we're going to be here. And now what else you think should be here, right? And so we got all types of feedback in regards to what should be there. But one other thing that we were able to share with community is there are things community say it wants, but then there has to be an economy, a financial model that works. And so having conversations around that as well.
Talk about that a little bit.
If you're in a community meeting and you say, how many people would love to have a workout facility in the community? Understanding that what you want, there has to be a primary market, enough of a primary market in order for it to work financially, and there has to be enough secondary market in order for it to work financially. So understanding the business model, right, what it takes. And so you have to, and that's exactly what happened with the cafe, right? People said, oh yeah, we want healthier options. That's why we did a healthy cafe. And all we have is McDonald's, Burger King. That's all they build in our neighborhoods. But then you go to other neighborhoods and they have these cafes and they have more healthy options. We thought about those things that they were accustomed to and they were used to. And so just being cognizant of, if we build this, we're going to need the patronage in order for it to sustain.
How did y'all end up putting the kitchen in there?
There was an opportunity, Healthy Food Financing Initiative is what it was called, through the Department of Health and Human Services, and that goes back to figuring out the funding streams, being aware
of what's happening,
into that. And one of the things that we were very good at Burton Bell Carr was identifying funding streams outside of the typical funding streams within the city. Some CDCs, they just looked at the City of Cleveland CDBG, and that's my funding stream. And understandably, because to work a CDC, it takes an extraordinary amount of energy and focus just to deal with the fires that you got to work on every day. And so if you're going to deal with the fires that you got to work on every day, and on top of that, you're going to think beyond what we're dealing with today and try to build for tomorrow, that's a very tough balance to manage. And not everybody is good at it. And and people ask me, even some other directors would ask me, how do you do it? And the reality is that I just worked more than you did. I just put in more.
Just put it in.
I mean, because the reality is that you can't fit all of this into an 8-hour workday.
Right.
It's a tremendous job that requires a really an unreasonable amount of your time in order to be successful. But I did it for 20 years.
Oh, to pull off big projects, man, you have to. I mean, because it takes that time. And your hard work didn't go in vain, man. Not at all, because there's other CDCs and other people who model your success, and they use your building and that development corporation as an example of what could be. And it's sort of like... hell, your Glenville Development Corporations, your Famico Foundations, your all these other development corporations, it was a lot more back then than it is now, who were around. You guys were known, but until you got there, y'all kind of like popped out of there with these projects and started doing some really big things and started setting the table. Now, again, I started out in the beginning when Famico's was with Jim, and they were over on Superior. So,
and by the way,
yeah.
he was a mentor. Jim Williams was
Yes.
a mentor. He's a legend of community.
Exactly. So me and Jim Williams, I started working for him back with Famico's there. Then they bought the new building. Then John came. So I watched. So that's what I'm saying. John was part of the bringing it up along with you. And then, Famico's is Famico's, not taking nothing from them, but in the talk of development.
They're saying that they were a powerhouse already.
Yes.
And Burton Bell Carr. Well, see,
yes.
Right? You know the history. Sometimes I have to tell people that history because people assume. Being in a neighborhood where you are of the community and you want to see valuable things that won't make people comfortable in their dependence, but would move them towards independence and stability, you are passionate about that, and it's you live it, you sleep it, you bathe in it. I mean, it's your everything,
right?
And sometimes, not that you do it for anyone to recognize it, but sometimes it does feel like, well, people don't realize all the things.
Oh no.
And I will tell you, when people do, right? And it's eerie because I just had this conversation with staff this morning. When people do, you don't really appreciate it, or I should say, you don't really think that you've done anything significant, because you still look at the community and still look at what isn't there that should be there. And so you feel like you've just scratched the surface. You've not done anywhere. You've not done anything so extraordinary that you should be patted on the back.
When you first got there, you guys only had $9,000 in the bank?
$9,000 in the bank against $27,000 of payables.
Whoa.
That was a challenge. We didn't have a computer. I had to work towards, establishing a network and the cost and how you're going to pay for it. But I will say, the way of getting out of that, the way of building and scratching and clawing and sort of climbing out of that, wasn't alone. Like there were people that looked at your effort, your energy, and invested in it and poured into it. And so anytime you're successful with something like that, it isn't a individual or 2 or 3 individuals that really do it. It's people pouring into, wow, that person has a vision, has a passion, and he's a doer. Right. And that's, I think, my success story is I was able to show in evidence that, look, if you invest in the things that we're trying to do, we're going to do them. We're going to get them done. So I had a lot of champions, had people like India Lee, who was first at LISC, then went to Neighborhood Progress, and then went to the Cleveland Foundation. I had people like Daryl Rush, who was at Neighborhood Progress, and then went to the City of Cleveland. People like Mark McDermott, who was at Enterprise Community Partners.
God, man, I remember all those people. Wow.
Wow. Had a guy that no one from Cleveland would probably know and remember, but John Moorhead, I just learned that he passed away at the Ohio Finance Fund, who I reached out to, talked to, and he was the first to invest into some of the things that we were doing. They invested into all of the things that you love about Bridgeport Place. So yeah, there were a number of people from various places that saw the vision, saw the work ethic, saw the results of when they did fund and poured into the work. That is how you get all of those type of things accomplished, is people believing and knowing that when you say you're going to do something, you're going to
you can get it done, and it's easier for them to believe and look forward to helping you do the next thing.
Right. I do have to give props to Randy McShepard, Damian Forche, and Keymon. Those were the pioneers and the men behind Ridall Green Partnership. Ridall Green Partnership is the success story, is the sustaining success story of the Urban Agriculture Innovation Zone, and that's what you're talking about.
Correct.
So that was a concept of having many players in urban agriculture working in an area that's all urban agriculture, recognizing that we can't build a house where every house once stood. What can we do with these large tracts of land? And so that was the concept, that was the idea. We had OSU Extension come in, and they received a large $700 and something thousand grant, and then another $500,000 grant, and they did a lot, but for what they got, they didn't do nearly as much as Ridall Green Partnership. We had a number of entities that come in. A lady came in and she was raising chickens, and we had Mobites. This is a vegan restaurant, mobile vegan restaurant. You'll see their truck. They have the most delicious vegan nachos that you ever want to try. I just love that. When you go to the festivals, I miss the festivals, I miss Mobites at the festivals. They would always be at the Hustler Street Festival, or any festival that you can think of. They grew in the Urban Agriculture Innovation Zone, and it was great. But that stick-to-itiveness, not everyone have that stick-to-itiveness, and one by one, people began to fall off and not do their part at making it the vision that we had created for it. But again, Ridall Green Partnership, they continue to expand, and now they're just huge. They're just huge. I mean, and they are the Urban Agriculture Innovation Zone now. They make up the Urban Agriculture Innovation Zone. And they have a few partners that can come in and support and help, but they are the driver at this point.
And that's the building. When you was talking about the vegan restaurant, was that part of the box restaurant that you built, or the facility right down the street? It's called
The Box Spot.
Box. Yeah, that's what
So
I'm talking about.
no, the vegan restaurant. No, I was speaking of just all of the players that was in the urban agriculture innovation zone back in like 2010,
Gotcha.
2011, 2012. But one by one, they just fell off.
Gotcha.
Right? And the one that stood and is still there is Red All Green Partnership.
Excellent. And what's about the Box Spot? I wanted, that's another innovative new idea that you guys had came up. What was the concept behind that?
To make a long story short, learned about shipping container retrofitting and how you could potentially do that at a very low cost, and began to look into designing a space of retrofitted shipping containers, and it just evolved. And we had a Rose Architectural Fellow on staff, and put him to work on coming up with a concept. And he did, and he came up with a brilliant concept. And he really is the visionary of the construction, right? Of it being 2-story with a courtyard and all of that. But yeah, that's how Box Spot. That was the conception of Box Spot. Then the reality is that it costs way more than we thought it would. But the good thing is that it did work. It did work.
And it's still working. It's still
it ended up being a $2 million project.
Woo!
But we were able to offset the cost with a lot of subsidy and a lot of grant work, whereas there's a very, very small, I don't even think, there is no mortgage on it. There's no mortgage on it. But you have, your utilities and all of that cost and the maintenance cost. So you're able to actually rent out the spaces. The spaces start at $275 a month, all in.
Really? Oh, that's not bad at all.
Yeah, that was the goal, right? And
that's not bad at all.
Of retailers that support each other.
And how long can you rent one of those places? This is not long-term rent, are they?
They are.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, if you have a business that is ideal for the community, the community would see as an amenity, yeah, you can. Now,
That's what I'm saying, man. You was over there doing some stuff, man. I keep saying, I got you. I understand where you at, because while you was talking, I was thinking the same thing. But, man, you was doing some good stuff over there. Let's talk about the radio real quick.
Man, if we had a radio station that just really catered, like an African-American oriented radio station. And so I looked into it. Like, if it doesn't exist, then is it possible that I can create it? And I looked into it, and sure enough, as I looked into it, I stumbled across this concept of community radio stations. It was in its infancy, and I just began to study it. And see, that's the kind of thing that I really did on my weekends. Like, I ain't had time to work on that during the week. During the week, I worked on that during the weekends, and eventually got to the point where, okay, I conceived WOBU as something that would not be a Burton Bell car thing, something that would stand on its own, something that would be separate. But when you get into the policies and the stipulations and the criteria for eligibility for certain things, you change your thought process. And so one of the criteria is that they base if you are in competition, if someone else seeks that space, that frequency, they base the award on how long you've been in existence. But Burton Bell Car at that time had been in existence for over 20 years.
Okay.
So I went to the board, pitched the concept to the board. The board was accepting. It's like, okay, yeah, all right, we see it. Not a lot of people saw it. And in fact, some people told me they didn't. Why would a community development corporation do a radio station? I still see why it makes sense.
Oh yeah.
And it's been very good for Burton Bell Carr.
What was the purpose of it, though?
There was no platform to amplify all of the things that are available to community, all of the things that we should be talking about, all of the things that we should have dialogue around, and something that you can listen to when you're in the car with your kids.
Correct,
right?
correct.
So it didn't exist. And so the reason why it made sense for the Community Development Corporation was because the Community Development Corporation on a daily basis want to promote things to the community and vet things with the community that there's no platform to do so. So how do we do that? We can do that on our website. We can do that in community meetings. But man, if we had a radio station, we can do that every single day with people just tuning in on their radio dial. So that was that's why it made sense for the Community Development Corporation to do it.
What was the criteria to?
Yeah, so when we first established the community radio station, and these are all good questions, but when we established the community radio station, we made it available for anyone. If you wanted a radio show, you go through obviously you just can't just
Right.
without,
Yeah, you just put anybody on.
right. So we had a training.
Right.
And we would do the training.
Oh, training.
Yeah, we would do the trainings once every 6 months, routinely. We had trainings where you go through this like Radio 101, where we teach you all of the ins and outs. You even learn how to use the boards and all of that. And when you're done, you get a certification, and you get a guarantee to have some parts of a radio show. Right now, you might not be someone who can project well, who can articulate well. And so you may not get a radio show, but you could be maybe the engineer of a radio show.
Right.
You can be a producer of a radio show. You can be someone who, filters content for a radio show. But you are guaranteed some part in association with the radio station. And everyone that went through the trainings, they were able to have, and most people that went through the training, they got a radio show.
That's right.
I would say 90% of the people that went through the training, they got a radio show. But like everyone,
Right, exactly.
not good,
Exactly.
doing talk radio. So we did want it to be good radio for the listening audience. So there were some people that we just had to say, hey, you don't have it. But most of the people, and we really encouraged it, particularly to those that never had the exposure to youth, to individuals who were really just disconnected. We saw it as a hook, right? And so the benefit, another reason and value to have a radio station is that there are people who are generally disengaged and won't engage any other way.
Yeah.
Like they're just not people that believe in connecting to anything that is structured.
That's correct.
Anything that is formal. But a radio station that can connect to that. Right.
Yeah.
So it's amplifying the needs and the interests, and even to discuss the solutions that we need to come up with to deal with the problems within the community.
But now you get to turn it up a notch, because now I'm finding what you're doing now is even more interesting, and I'm really trying to see, and I guess I'm not trying to see. I'm gonna be very anxious and watching you from afar to see how you transition from taking all of that you learned and developed and done there at Burt Bell Carr to now coming to this philanthropic organization that you're working for now, the St. Luke's Foundation, which I read about it and I knew about it. I think Councilman Westbrook was working over there at one point in time. I knew that there were, back in the earlier years, that when the foundation was doing something out there as far as the selling of the building or something to that nature, I know it was some stuff, but my biggest connection to St. Luke's, to me, my first surgery I had, a gallbladder surgery I had, was done at St. Luke's, right there in that same building.
Okay.
So I can say that that's been my connection to St. Luke's. So for the audience and everybody, man, what the heck is the St. Luke's Foundation and what does it do?
St. Luke's Foundation is a foundation that's very intentional today. That, to me, operationalizing that vision, I kind of see St. Luke's Foundation like I see our country, right? There were forefathers. I gotta be careful how I say this. There were forefathers that they had a vision for a better situation, but they weren't necessarily practicing what they needed to practice themselves to make that vision a reality. Right? But they had the foresight to say that we're going to write this into our vision. And so for that reason, I applaud and have a lot of veneration for those who established the foundation, because they really took the foundation in the direction that gradually got to this point where you have an African American CEO from the community, and I have the perspective of valuing community voice, the need to uplift the community voice, the need to be responsive to the needs and interests of the community, so that we are not just making decisions within a vacuum, or we are not being esoteric in our office that's on the 6th floor of the Ivory Tower, but that we are in the trenches within the community, listening, understanding, learning, and then giving the community the power to, and by power I mean the resources, to work towards the issues and the problems that impact the community.
For most people, I would say, oh, that sounds good, and we'll see what you do, but I have a good feeling in your track record that is who you are, and that you will fight for that. And in fact, you're starting to make those steps now with this Lift Every Voice, the project that you guys are doing. I believe that's one of your pet projects there at the foundation. You want to give us some insight about what Lift Every Voice is all about?
Lift Every Voice is a community engagement platform. It is LEV, standing for Lift Every Voice, LEV216.org, where you and anyone else can go on and express what you want to see in our community that relates to health equity, right? And then we respond to you, letting you know what we're doing to address your needs. So we're being responsive. We are living and we're showing an example of true responsive grant making by creating Lift Every Voice. And so I do encourage your audience to go on lev216.org and complete the survey. Right now, we are in the process of hiring a communications and marketing director to ensure that we do that responsive part, right? That we communicate back to you what it is that we're doing to make it the interactive, because it's not just for you to do a survey, it's for us to also like capture your information and then share with you what we think we heard, and then share with you how we're going to respond and how we're going to be consistent with what we hear you're saying.
So that information is mainly for the service area of the St. Luke's Foundation?
That's a great question. So we really promote it heavily within the St. Luke's footprint, because obviously we do want more people from the footprint to complete it, but anyone within Cuyahoga County can complete it. And we do encourage anyone who are a beneficiary or should be a beneficiary of the services of the grantees that we fund, of the organizations we fund, we're asking you to complete the survey. We want to know what you think, what organizations you go to when you are in need, what organizations have served you well. Far too often, again, in this esoteric way of grant making, we just think we know based on the relationships that we have as philanthropic executives as to who's doing good work. From our perspective, we want to know who's doing good work from the
community's perspective. That's interesting. What's the point in it?
The primary use of it is really to understand what community want. and be responsive of that. We're saying that we're community facing. We're saying that we're going to be community responsive. We're saying that we're going to put our dollars in the community the way that the community want to be served, right? That's what we're saying. And so how do we do that? How do we know that, right? We need some sort of mechanism for community to tell us, right? Now, we are also doing many other things. Like we did a bike ride through the community, and we just stopped and talked to people that was just walking down the street, that's just at the corner store, just having casual conversations. We're in a pandemic, so it's tough to do community engagement during a pandemic, but you know, we're trying as best as we can to be as available and as accessible to the community, and to understand what it is that the community want to see in regards to health and wellness within the community.
A couple of questions on that. One, that your area now doesn't have a CDC, I believe.
It does, actually.
It does?
Yeah, it has two. It has three, actually. It has Burton Belcar expanded. Before I left.
Oh, okay.
Before I left Burton Belcar.
Okay.
Yeah, before I left Burton Belcar, we expanded into the Buckeye area.
All right, okay.
So we served, so Burton Belcar served Buckeye. And Union Miles it has some portion of, and also
Fairfax?
No, Mount Pleasant now.
Oh.
Mount Pleasant now is a CDC that's struggling.
Yeah.
And so we were funding them, but we're not funding them now because they are struggling. But we are willing to support whatever comes from that. So they're going through a planning session now. The community is around how they want to be served, community development services.
They need Tim Tramble.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. But let me say this, you know, I think Burton Belcar is in good hands with Joy Johnson. She was there 18 years of my 20 years, and I think she's working through the challenges. She has a lot of turnover over there, but she's working through the challenges.
So let's talk about these grants. How do you get a grant?
We are a very transparent foundation in that we have our funding decision logic on the website, where anyone who's interested in applying for a grant and they don't know if they might qualify or not, go on our website under apply for a grant. You'll see the funding decision logic where we'll outline who we fund, why, and under what criteria we will evaluate your request. So we do 3 different types of grants. We have a neighborhood advisory council that actually does the community grants, where individuals, they don't have to be nonprofit organizations, they don't have to be 501c3s. We have entities that will work as the fiscal agent for you. You can be a block club, you can be a mother, you can be a community association, you can be an association of kids that goes
face painters,
AJ Rickoff, right? You can be a seniors group that feel like there's a void within the community that you want to fill, and you apply to the Resident Advancement Committee of the foundation. The Resident Advancement Committee is comprised of all residents of St. Luke's footprint. Right? And so they make the decisions. We don't have anything to do with it. We package the applications and so forth for them, make it as easy as possible for them to make their decisions, but they make the decisions. And in fact, we even pay them for their time because their time is valuable too. We have that mindset that we don't believe that the residents should be the only one at the table that's not getting paid. So anything that we do with residents, we pay them for their time and their energy.
What's the minimum and max on that grant?
Minimum and max.
The minimum.
That's a good question. So
that's a community grant.
Yeah, there's no real minimum, but I don't suggest that you spend your time if you're not going to do anything. I would say $250 and over, but they fund it as high as $15,000.
Really?
They have the determination as to what the maximum will be, and they have moved that maximum from time to time. Now it's currently at $6,000.
Okay.
But it has been as high as $15,000.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the discretionary grants,
Mm-hmm.
which is internal within the staff. And then we have the board grants. And the board grants are the bigger grants. Anything over $30,000 is a board grant.
So same type of criteria to go for a board grant. It's just that you're asking for more money. It puts you in a different criteria, right?
And the different
Same person, mom, pop can apply for that.
It's important to know though,
Mm-hmm.
because the board grant is at least a 3-month process because
Mm-hmm.
it's the board grant. So the board actually has to go through evaluating the grants and approving the grants. The discretionary grants are approved by the program team.
Now, are these once a year round?
That's a good question. So board grants, they have 3 cycles.
Mm-hmm.
The first cycle has a deadline in March.
Mm-hmm.
The second cycle has a deadline in June, and the final cycle has a deadline in September. Now, the March deadline, you don't get approved because it's a board process until the June board meeting. The June deadline, you don't get approved until the September board meeting. And the September deadline, you don't get approved until the December board meeting. So it's a longer process, but the amounts are more significant. The average board grant is probably about, I would say, $75,000.
Interesting. Huh. Well, Tim, I think you answered a lot of questions for us today. I want to bring you back again to really talk some more about the St. Luke's Foundation, because I think that is, as that evolves, I definitely want to be a partner with you on that. I know that you got some really good things that's going to work. You work hard like I do, so I know it's going to come to you, and I want to be there to help you develop some of those things out, man, because I got good faith in you based off of your track record that you're going to do great things there, man. If they gave you the ability to give some money that you can do some stuff with, and it's all about ideas, I'm sure you're going to come up with some. But I got one last question. Mm-hmm. If it was a way to bring you guys all together and say, we're going to tackle whether that's lead, whether that's hunger, whether that's real estate, or whatever you guys decide, I think it's an issue. What do you think about that?
For example, people can say that about the entire county, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we just make the entire county one city, one neighborhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then what I want on my block, it might be different than what you want on your block. What the prevailing issue is on my block and in my neighborhood might be different than the prevailing issue on your block and in your neighborhood. And even more significant and more important is, let's say we have the same issues and the same challenges. How you might want to go about addressing those things versus how me and my neighbors might want to go about addressing those things may be different. And I should have the autonomy to chart my own course. Me and my neighbors should have the autonomy to do that. So that's one of the reasons why the CDC model and the model of, while it may seem like we're, I would say, fragmented, that in some cases it makes sense to be that way, right? Because you want to have a democratic way and you don't want to be esoteric in how you're making decisions. But there are things that we as funders collectively are coming together and pulling our resources to do.
Okay.
And you'll be pleased to know that in some of these spaces, it is things that impact Black and brown people. It's things like, I'm sure you're familiar with the Black Futures Fund.
Correct.
Right? The Bell Project, right? The Racial Equity, Racial Justice Initiative. You know, these are things that the Lead Safe Housing Initiative. Most of the foundations in Cleveland have come together to say we want to deal with this collectively. This wasn't something that the city of Cleveland had to carry by itself. We came together and said we want to deal with this collectively, and we all have contributed to that. We all contributed to the COVID Rapid Response Fund, and we are all contributing to the Collaborative on COVID Recovery. So there are things that funders have done come together and work on collectively, right? But it can feel like, there aren't things that people are partnering as much as they should partner on. But I think that there are some examples where, although it might feel that way, the counter is happening. People are coming together. I think the philanthropic community, I come into it at a really interesting time because I saw what you saw. My purview was that the foundations wanted us as nonprofits. They would always talk about collaboration and partnership, but we knew underneath the surface that, hey, you guys got your issues.
Correct.
You guys have your differences. You can't even get together and work out things collectively, but you expect us to do it. And I'm proud to say that today, right now, we collectively have come together on so many things. There's over, I want to say, at least 7 funds that we're all working towards collaborative, effective, and impactful outcomes on together. And most of them are things that contribute to equity, things that contribute to uplifting Black and brown people. That is another thing and another reason why I'm so proud of that. There is a higher consciousness now than ever in the philanthropic community around racial equity. We have a young man at the Gun Foundation, much younger than me, in his 30s, that lead the Gun Foundation, right? And just 2 years ago, we didn't have any African American led foundation.
Correct.
We have senior staff of foundations. Now, Cleveland Foundation, they had that for many years, but the other foundations, not really. And it's happened over the last 3-4 years in all of the not all, but it's happening more, right? And even where it's not happening, more and more of them are conscious of equity and conscious of the importance of being a leader, right, in that space. That if we expect society to be more diverse, then we have to be more diverse. And I think that all of the foundations in the city have recognized that they need to lean in on equity and racial inclusion and racial diversity. So I'm really happy to be a part of this. And again, St. Luke's, I think, led the way, right? They were the first, and since Steve Mentor to hire a African American to lead their foundation. And I gave you their mission and their vision statement. I say there because it was theirs before I came on. It's ours, it's mine now. But it was something that's what attracted me to the foundation. They're very bold mission statement, very bold and ambitious vision statement and declaration of that poverty, and if not for poverty and racism, that people will thrive, right? That is something that our foundation leadership, particularly the board, really has led the way in for other foundations to look at as a model. So I'm proud of that, and I think that my hire is consistent with that because, as I told you, I'm really leading the way around how to operationalize that equity. As you say, yeah, that soundbite sounds good, that soundbite sounds good, but how is equity actually operationalized? And we're operationalizing equity. We have equity questions written into our applications where if you are applying for our funds, you know already what we're looking for. We're asking you the makeup of your management team. We're asking you the makeup of your board. We're asking you how do the people you intend to serve benefit outside of the service from this? How do they benefit financially from these grant funds? So we're really going deeper and beyond this traditional way of charity. And what I'm saying is that we're not into charity. we're into empowerment.
I've got very, very high hopes for you over there. I know you have, like I said, a great track record of bringing things together. I can go on and on just what you did prior to coming to there and just everything else, because we didn't even touch on the consent decree. We didn't get into any of that stuff. So I do know I'm going to have you come back again so we could talk more about that. And maybe you can be our person to kind of help us talk more about how you guys are working more with these other organizations to come together on solving some of the issues that are taking place throughout our community. And again, I would love for us to be able to do anything we can to help the foundation be able to, push your agenda forward and help you to be successful over there, because I know you will be. So right now, what I like you to do is you got this camera right there that belongs to you, sir. You got a few minutes to say whatever you like to say, but give us some information on how they can get in touch with you for sure, and how they can apply for those grants.
Well, thank you very much, Ken. And I would just say it's been an honor and a pleasure to be here with Ken. I appreciate your questions. I think they were very thorough. They made me think. And it shows that you really do. You really do know your history around community development and my place in it. And I do appreciate that.
Thank you.
I appreciate all of your positive comments that you gave me grace in acknowledging the hard work that went into community development during my years in that field. As far as what message we have for people in regards to the St. Luke's Foundation, we want people to know that your voice really does matter. We really want to amplify your voice. There are a lot of things that we're working on now. We have Lift Every Voice that's out there and available for community to share what you feel the foundation should invest our money in. We got a $232 million endowment, and we give out about $7 million of that each year. And it is your opportunity to say what should be invested in, and we want to invest it in the livelihood and the future of the residents of the St. Luke's footprint and disadvantaged individuals throughout Cuyahoga County. Thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure. You all have a wonderful day, and go to lev216.org and share your thoughts on Lift Every Voice. Thank you.
Thanks again for Mr. Tramble for meeting us. We will leave links in our section at the bottom of our description for how you can get more information about Lift Every Voice. See you at the next show. Cool. Mr. Tramble, excellent work, sir.
Excellent. Man, you really went deep. And you really did your homework, brother. It's like, wow, okay.
Oh yeah.
You did your homework.
I did my homework, man.